Good morning, everyone. My name is James Morrison. I am from the Highland Specialty Teams specific to WorkView. Thanks for joining me this morning for our WorkView 201 webinar. Um, it's 11 o'clock on the dot. I think I'll wait just another minute before I get started here. I see a few other attendees still rolling in here. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started here. So again, thanks for joining us today. If you were able to attend our one-on-one session, it really did cover, I think, a lot of the breadth of WorkView and what WorkView is. But just to level set, I did want to just present just a few slides before we jumped into the demonstration, just in case anyone wasn't able to attend, right? So WorkView, really to us, it's our rapid application development platform. It's your ability to move away from thinking of OnBase as standard document management and more data management. We all have applications that we've seen where someone maybe creates a form just to collect some data to then route that form through some process where we're not evaluating the document itself, but more or less the data. So that's really where WorkView shines. WorkView is very good at taking data and really doing something with it, presenting this user interface to someone while providing a workflow process to then take this object, as we call it in WorkView. So just to level set on some naming conventions, we have classes, attributes, and we refer to WorkView items or more or less as objects. So we have the ability with a Unity lifecycle to actually route a WorkView object through a workflow. So think of it in that manner where we're going to take the data, we're going to put it into something like this, and this is the object. This case is actually going to be routed through the workflow. So um, also, never delineate between workflows or WorkView. There's never been a WorkView application that we've built to date that didn't have some type of workflow that ties to it. So again, just to even talk about when you would use this tool. I think we can all honestly answer, complexity counter here. This would be a number one on the complexity counter. I have a form that I need to store. I have a document that I need to store. That's really easy to do. I think we can all say, we have a solution to do that. Maybe it's a workflow process. I think we can all answer this one pretty easily too, right? It's some logic on the back end. We're going to take this document and push it through a process. Where you should think about WorkView in your organization is scenarios like this. A customer calls. My rep needs to create an issue, log the call, find the related record, link the issue to that record, send communications back to the customer saying that we've received it, then start working that issue through a process flow, all with ad hoc tasks and notes along the way. And then they need reports laid on top of that. How would you go about presenting that type of, tackling that type of solution today? We've seen customers that take a Unity form and they'll take a Unity form and route it through, and that Unity form even spawns multiple Unity forms off of it as a workflow to maybe manage a disparate type of process like this. Well, this is where you can start thinking of WorkView as the answer. Where you might have these types of items in your organization, really great use case for WorkView. If you have an Access database that you're leveraging today, those are very easy to flip over, and you'll see the tool that we use to do that. We're able to look at an Access database right next to our Excel document as we build what's called our ACE file and move forward with that. So some more WorkView concepts. So within WorkView, we have the concept of attributes and classes. So classes are more or less the tables or the containers of data. Those can be independent. They can relate to one another. There's 4 different class types within WorkView, and we'll show those when we get into the actual demonstration portion here. And then we have our attributes, and attributes are more or less the keywords of your application. We have the ability to map a keyword directly to an attribute. So if you have a form on the front end of a process, maybe you're a government organization and you have this public facing form, we're obviously not going to have everyone have access to the application itself. Well, that form can drive our WorkView app, and it's very easy to map those keywords over to attributes. So an example here would be an employee class. And within employee, we might have employee ID, employee name, department, role, who their manager is, and maybe their start date. So, and then you heard me refer to the ACE file. And the ACE file is really the way that we go about building our applications going forward now. So the ACE file allows us to distinguish what are our classes within this application, what are the attributes within that class, and then we can specify what's the data type of that class. You can see we have integers, alphanumeric, relationship type attributes that will relate to other classes. So in this one in particular, you'll see the advisor class up there is a relationship class to another tab that relates. So if you have any familiarity with relational databases and how data relates to one another, this should be pretty familiar to you. So we lay out our data in this style. We can specify even the data sets. So here you'll see this one was specific to a higher education counselor app that we built for a customer. So you can also specify your filters and the views. And I'll talk about why that's important when we actually go into the demonstration itself. But just know, in the past, it's still configuring. There's no coding involved here, but it's a labor of love once you get in there and you start creating these classes one at a time, and then having to manage the relationship between the classes. And once you've done that, then you have to right click on every single class and go to create view. And I'll show that here on the live demo here in a second, but just know this saves you an insane amount of time on the front end of building an application. We also built some tools into that ACE file that will allow you to throw an error. So if there's a problem within your relationship here as you lay your data structures out, it will throw an error upon import. So that's a really nice feature upon this tool. So today, I just want to make sure, WorkView, it's often, and we're a victim of this. Highland in general, we've named it ourselves, a case manager tool. It went from WorkView to WorkView Case Manager. Don't pigeonhole this into case management. It can be virtually anything. And when I say anything, it can be a case, it can be a request, it can be a visit. And whether that visit is from a employee, a customer, a constituent, a student, you name it. Maybe it's a complaint, whatever it is, we can relate it to whoever that thing relates to. And then what else? What are the activities, the notes, and the tasks around that thing? What is it? When, why, and where? Well, we can start to lay that type of information out. What type of request is it? What type of visit? What type of complaint? The description, the time frame, who's going to own this complaint? Let me move this over here. The description, the what, why, where, basically we're able to lay out all that information and then relate it back. This can all be related to one another through our classes. We can lay content on top of this. So what OnBase really has been doing for 25 years, the document management side of the house. And then we can also lay workflow on this. So we can actually lay a process on top of this application. You don't have to reconceptualize the solution every time you build it. An example here would be maybe you start with a vendor management solution. Maybe your organization struggles with managing all the vendors you work with. What's that vendor's status? Maybe that's going to be the what. Who is that vendor? Where is that vendor? The address, the information. And then you realize, hey, we need to extend this out to maybe contracts as well. So you're able to tie an additional class into this application. And lastly, don't think you have to get this perfect the first go around. I just like to introduce the idea of the MVP, the minimum viable product. What can we put out there that's better than what we're doing today that we can build on? So, look at OnBase and the way that you build a WorkView application in this fashion. It doesn't have to be perfect the first time. You can always continually enhance and make that solution better. Before we go into the demo, just know the ACE file that I'm going to show for our demo today is available on the Application Builder community. So if you're a member of the Highland community, you can go to the Resources tab here and download the actual ACE file that we're going to use today for our demonstration purposes. So for our demo, when we actually go into the building side of the house, these are the 5 things we're going to cover today. We're going to cover pulling in an ACE file and actually pulling in that Excel document live and showing how it's laid out and some ways that we can manipulate that ACE file based on our needs. We're also going to go over the 4 different class types within an application. So those class types include external classes, standard classes, associated classes. So we'll go over why you would use one class over another and how to build those out. We'll talk about mappings. So mappings is your ability to tie documents to your application. So not only can we tie documents through mappings, but we can also tie folders. We can tie documents upon import. So that drag and drop style functionality, hey, anytime someone drags this document onto this screen, we're going to import that document as this particular document type. And then lastly, triggers and notifications. Those are pretty self-explanatory. Triggers allow us to do calculations within WorkView. They allow us to maybe combine 2 different attributes into a single attribute. You can think of maybe you have first name and last name as separate attributes within an application off of a form. We have the ability to combine those into just name with first and last name together, and notifications. So with that, let me before we jump into the actual demo of building, I thought I would show a little bit of our internal system of Highland Software's use of WorkView. And this is going to relate to what we're going to show. We're going to show a software tracking application, or even like you can think of a device management or asset management, assets tied to a particular employee. I'd show you my particular record here. So when I come to my Find menu, I come to Employee, and we're going to search. We'll do a broad search, and this returns every employee that's currently at Highland Software. I come to last name and I start to type in my last name, and there's my particular record. When we open this up, you'll see, I've got my employee photo here, all my information listed here, any additional info that HR has on the system, what building I'm in, what office I'm in. If I were a manager, the direct reports that would report to me would be listed here. Any of my corporate news subscriptions will be listed here. And lastly, the one that kind of relates to the demo we're going to show today is the assigned hardware. So what hardware is assigned to me from IS? Our mobile is actually tracked on a separate application, but any hardware that's loaned to me. So we have a loan process. If I forget my laptop somewhere and I need a loaner for the day, it would be listed here. We also have large pieces of hardware that are loaned for demo purposes or on-site conventions and conferences and things like that. So you can see I've had, I have my monitors, my laptop, I've had some external hard drives. I still have 2 of these. One of them has been misplaced. But that being said, your ability to track this information, you could very easily build an application similar to this with the demonstration I'm going to show today. So let's move over into the actual app building side of the house, the 201, where you actually build your applications. This is in OnBase Studio, and you'll notice another great feature when you build out your applications that I think we don't talk about is the ability to build your workflows hand in hand. As you build an application out, you can tie it to a workflow process, or maybe you already have a workflow process and you want to build an application on top of it. They're built right next to each other, which that's a great feature. If you're familiar with workflow today and you've been building workflow solutions, maybe it's easiest for you to think of the process first and then build the application. Just know there's many different mindsets to going about building apps. There's no right or wrong way. So we have our team internally has very diverse methodologies. I personally like to lay out my data first. I want to see what data I'm tracking, how it relates to one another, and then I'll build the user interface. We have other members of our team, Kayla in particular, she likes to build the user interface first, where she'll build using something like Draw.io or Balsamiq, a drawing tool, to actually draw the user interface and then build the application around that. So just know you can think of it and really start to develop your WorkView applications in any way you see fit. So we're actually going to start our building today with a Excel document. And this Excel document is a software tracking application. So this allows you, if your organization struggles with tracking all the different software that you use, this is a very easy way to manipulate that and to take and track now every piece of software. And we actually had a customer for a workshop just a few weeks ago who've taken this particular ACE file and they added another class for licensing. So now they're tracking all the software they use along with the licensing that ties to it. So back to what I was mentioning before, you can always extend these applications out and make them do more over time. So this is our ACE file. As you can see along the bottom, I have different tabs here: the software, the solution, the external party that we have, purchased that software from, who the internal users are that tie to that party. Just note, any one of our classes that have a hashtag in front of it, it's going to skip those, like traditional programming. But these are just some example classes for you to see the different types of data types that we can have as part of our attributes. The descriptions, the data sets, we can set default values. We can set one of these as a unique index value. So maybe this ID, every time this particular thing happens and we create a case, we're going to have a unique identifier. Is this the primary attribute that drives this particular application? We have that marked as true. So you'll also note we can specify our filters as part of this application. As part of this Excel file, our views, and our sections. And that's important, and we'll see why that's important when I actually pull this application in. So you'll see here, I have my software class, solution class, external party. We're now going to pull this Excel file into OnBase Studio. So when I come to OnBase Studio, you'll see I have this WorkView tab. I'm actually going to come over to this button, Application Creation Accelerator. And if you don't see this button, it is only available if you're on OnBase 18 or higher. So even if you haven't upgraded your production environment, I highly recommend upgrading your test environment if you're going to go about starting to build applications, because this will save you a ton of time. So when I come here, I'm going to go to Import ACE Application. We'll browse out, grab that ACE file. You could rename it right here if you needed. So, we'll call it Software Tracker Navient Webinar. So at this stage, if I had an error within the application, if there was something wrong with my attributes, or I had a misspelling of some type, maybe the data type or the integer type, it would throw an error right there, and it would also throw an error and specify where within that Excel document that error is located. It would say, sheet 2, column 3, cell 4, error within data type. So you can very easily identify and correct your errors and pull that in. If you also did not specify views or filters, you'll notice I have these checkboxes at the bottom. So you can automatically create a filter and a view for each one of these. And we'll talk about those in a little bit, but filters are really your way to constrain data down. So when I jumped over to my WorkView application, when I clicked employees on the left-hand side, that was a filter that we actually jumped to. And that was actually a search filter that allows you to search, by name. And we just did the broad search and returned all employees. But you can automatically create the filters, but we've already specified those on our ACE file. Here you'll just assign which employees you want access to the application, and that's it. You'll get this summary that lets you know exactly what you're pulling in, all the different classes, the different attributes within those. You'll see the views that we've assigned along with the users. When I click finish, this stands up my application for me. So this stands up all those classes, all the different filters we specified, all the different views that we've specified, and I'll show why that's so important in just a second here. Sometimes takes a second with my demo environment here. So while that's happening on the back end, we'll go to, actually I can't jump to another class, so we'll just wait 1 second for this to finish up. So The reason why that's so important, why that Excel document is such a game changer in terms of starting to build apps from scratch is the way we do it in the past is through the right-click methodology. So if you needed to create a class onto this, you would right-click your application, come to new, and you would create a class in this fashion. So you create these one at a time, and we were able to upload and create, 5 different classes along with, maybe 50 different attributes into the system at one time. Let me just note here, I really do always use the new class methodology. We really strive away from the existing class. The reason why is just the core of how OnBase is wired. If you do use an existing class, you will likely have some problems with the import export. Um, I'm sure some of you have heard we're really trying to improve that process, but today, as it sits, if you were to build an application in a test environment and wire it to an existing class and then export that to a production environment, you would have to rewire a lot of that. The way that we build our applications now is we always use the new class, and you can, create an external class that actually points to another class, if that makes sense. So we're essentially just looking into another class within an OnBase application, rather than tying it to that directly, hardwiring it, I should say. We're creating a placeholder for that to look somewhere versus that hardwiring. So let me just note the 4 different class types. We have a standard class. If the class is going to be, the data is actually going to be stored inside of WorkView, we would use a standard class here. An extension class. An extension class, you can think about maybe applicant to employee. Maybe we are going to have applicant data where we have applicant name and all that information, but the moment that that hiring decision is made, we're going to create an extension class off of that applicant class that will have employee ID, department, role, etc. So an extension class, we really don't use these that often, but again, a powerful tool. The association class. The association classes allow us to relate one class to another. So we'll talk about that here in a second, but the example would be maybe we're going to have an employee relations application. We are going to have our ability to track anything that happens in the workplace. Well, you can then create an association class between incident to employee, show me all incident types related to employees, and then you can reverse engineer that with that association class. And lastly, arguably the most powerful is our external class. And our external class allows us to pull data from third-party applications or databases that you have access to today. And this one actually has some additional features, so we'll drill in a little bit here. So here's my different connection types. We have a local or a link server. We have an ODBC connection. I'm obviously licensed for everything within my system here, so you'll see every option available. We've got the broker, the Unity scripting. So, however we need to connect to that external class or that database, just know we have multiple ways to do that. There are some limitations though, just to speak to a linked versus the ODBC connection. ODBC connection is going to be powerful. It also allows us to rewrite back to that database. So if you're making changes in a WorkView app and you want to write those changes back to your database, you're going to want to use an ODBC connection. Just know there are some limitations with filtering. Within filtering for an ODBC connection, we really can't filter down data, obviously because that data exists in a third-party application. Whereas if it's linked, we can run an external filter and really drill down into that data within an app. So obviously pluses and minuses to both of those, but just know we have multiple ways to link to data in those third-party applications you have today. So just for my demo today, we're going to jump over to our existing classes. We'll show, so we've created external party class, internal user, software, and solution. We also have some filter bars that have been set up. If I go to my filter bars, it shows, and again, just to speak to how this relates to the application itself, let's open up an existing app that I have here within my demo environment. I'll walk through the application and we'll show the actual OnBase end user side, just so you can see exactly what you would be building there. So these filter bars that you see here that we've created basically automatically right off of our Excel document are the same filter bars that we would see over here on the left-hand side. So in this case, this is an FMLA leave application. Here's my filter bar, display all internal contacts, display all FMLA leaves, and then all tasks that are currently in flight for this application. So these filter bars are your ability to parse that out. And we can build filter bars in any way you see fit. We can constrain these down to maybe days. So maybe show me all contracts expiring in 30, 60, 90 days. And that's your type of filtering based on the days. Maybe we're going to filter these based on cases assigned to you, based on your username. We can do that. Maybe we're going to filter based on case type. So just know, as you take this data and push it into your application, these filter bars allow you to parse that out and virtually create custom queries. That's another way to think about those filters. So some other things to know. Let's open one of these classes up and we'll talk about some things that we can do within a class. So mappings. Mappings is your ability to tie documents to your application. So here you'll notice we have document types, we have forms, we have folder types, and we have document import. So what this allows is your ability to take certain document types and map them to an application. So if I click add here, we could specify our document type that we want to pull in. So, this is going to be, if you're the type of customer that likes to leverage a Unity form and your Unity form is going to drive your application, this is where you would select that. So here, maybe we're going to do benefit change. And here's your ability to create that mapping between attributes and keywords. So if you've been living in OnBase and workflow for years, you're familiar with keywords and that concept, this is your ability to take those keywords and map them right into attributes within your application. So here we would select, what attribute are we mapping to? Maybe software name is going to equal, software name as a keyword. But your ability to map those, and you can have multiple different keyword mappings. These also apply to the indexing of a document. So we can create a drag and drop style mapping. So let me just go over to that. So that's my ability to map document types. We can map folder types to this as well. So if you're looking maybe at an HR type application and you want to pull that HR employee file, we can map that folder directly to the application. Same style, I would just click add, and we would go through that process where you would specify the folder type you would like to map to your app. And then the drag and drop. To me, this is really powerful from an end user standpoint. It makes it really easy, really seamless for that end user to capture documents that are maybe part of a case. And keep in mind, these are all specific to the view that they're looking at. So, maybe you have an incident management type application or a vendor management application where within that app you have POs or a different type of screen created. Maybe that's only for dragging, dropping, and capturing actual purchase orders or invoices. So we can specify drag and drop based on a class type. So when I'm looking at the software class and I drag and drop a document onto it, what's the document that we're going to add? So we would first, do that mapping that we just talked about, and then you would specify the document type that you want that to be. So very seamless from a document capture standpoint, very seamless to create that drag and drop style mapping right on this using this document import. So two other things to note here. Obviously the folders, the filters that we're creating that are based on this is just showing all software. If we needed to create a new filter, we would right click, come to new, create our filter. And here's where you would specify, what are we actually filtering down? So maybe this is going to be software type or who uses this. You could very easily filter down and create new filters. Just note, again, through that right-click type of technology, you can add virtually anything to your application. This is a good time to note, again, the power of that ACE file. We've already created a filter and a view for every one of those classes when these came in. So there's a filter that's specific to every one of these as they came in through that Excel document, and also a view that's specific to each of these. So let's open up one of these views just to show. Again, not the prettiest application, but it gets you much further ahead than if you were to build this from scratch. If this is my starting point from an Excel document, I'm light years ahead of what I was likely doing in the past. So here's where your ability to specify and do a drag and drop style functionality within your toolbox. So here's where you would see your attributes listed over here on the left-hand side. And this is where you can create, that drag and drop functionality. So maybe you want the sales contact. I'm sorry, that's already on here. So maybe the version, actually that's already on there as well. So I'm trying to find an attribute that's not listed there yet. Editor. Well, either way, so we have the ability here through OnBase 18, that's another enhancement. If you have built any applications on any further versions of OnBase 17 or past, you are not familiar with this drag and drop style designer. So if you've built Unity forms in the past, this is very, very similar. You can see we can insert all of our different layout elements, all the different attributes that you've built in the application. And again, it's all through this drag and drop style. We can also embed filters within this app. So those filters, as we build, they're not only usable on the left-hand side to show, contracts expiring within 30, 60, 90 days, like I mentioned, maybe you're going to actually add that filter to your view. So filters can be added to views. Here you'll see on the right-hand side, we can get into some user interface. I did like to mention, just to drop, Kayla on my team produced a great blog post on the app builder community on user interface and creating some different views and making these views pretty for those end users. So you can add different style sheets to this, different scripting if you needed some script to happen, on load, on close. We can add all those different types of things here on focus, on blur. So the building and the user interface is all listed here. And I really encourage you to take a look at Kayla's builder design blog. So to move back over into the last pieces I wanted to cover, which were triggers and notifications. So triggers allow us to essentially make something happen with these attributes. And let me actually go to an existing trigger that I created. So this is an FMLA leave application, and FMLA, I think everyone's pretty familiar, right? So Family Medical Leave Act. Typically you're designated X amount of days for FMLA. So what we did was we created a trigger in here just to do a very basic calculation. So if I come to my triggers, you'll see we have an hours left trigger. And what this is doing is it's looking at, upon which event, and here's where you can actually configure that. So your different actions you can set, you can average, max, min, sum. In this case, we're actually just setting we're setting an attribute based on some logic. And you'll see there's our calculation. And we're doing basically total hours minus hours used. Very, very simple. And what that's doing within WorkView on the end user side, let's open up one of these FMLA reports. That's just doing a very basic calculation for me on the left-hand side here. So these hours left, total hours, hours used, hours left. If you were to modify this, it's just basically doing that math for me on the fly based on that trigger. So you can use triggers to combine attributes, to do sums, to do calculations, virtually anything you need within your application itself. And lastly, we will talk about notifications. So notifications, not only can you program notifications if there's a workflow tied to this application, you can obviously build notifications on the workflow side of the house. If you're familiar with that, that's completely fine. Again, just speaking to, there's more than one way to build an app nowadays. You can build these notifications directly through WorkView as well. So here's where you can specify, the name of this notification, the description, and then create that message. You can specify the recipients of that message, create different conditions, send notifications when this object is changed, deleted, a case gets deleted and you want to be notified. You can very easily create that type of notification here. So notifications configured right on the back end of WorkView in Studio here. And again, you can have multiple notifications types that you can leverage. Maybe you want to create a very basic one that says, this case has been deleted. Well, you can put different tokens in here that says case, and maybe you have a case ID number, or we'll put, case value or object ID. Case object ID number has been deleted. Oops, I deleted my entire thing. We'll do the insert token. We could set that condition to only send when this is deleted. Save this, and you can add this notification to any application that you ever build. So you can use these notifications on a more broad standpoint, I think, than workflow notifications. So that's one of the differences when you think about why would I use one over the other. You can build this notification once and have it tied to many of these. So maybe it's going to be a new case has been created, a case has hit the queue, and rather than adding that as a system task in workflow, you can add that on this side of the house. So with that, that's really what I wanted to cover today when I went over the 201 side of the house and how we can walk through going from that actual Excel document to a usable application in the system. Really, the next step here, if we were going to use, let's say, this software tracking application, would be to really populate it with data, populate it with what's the actual applications we're using today. And you'll see we have some tools listed on the top here that allow us to import data. So if you were to use this import, just save my changes really quickly. This allows you to import data in multiple formats. We've got XML file, Excel file, or a CSV. So again, if you've got an Access database that you're using today or something like that, that's a little clunky, that's difficult to maintain, you could see how it's very easy to take an Excel document, lay it out next to that Access database app that you're using, and really map it over. You're going to map over what are the attributes you want in that application, and we can even take the data from that existing app and port it over through this fashion. So with that, I'd like to open it up for anyone that's got questions. Let me take a look over here and see if anybody has asked any questions yet. But with that, again, thanks everyone for attending. Let's take a look. So I don't see any questions that have been put in yet. So I just want to know if anybody does have any questions, we can absolutely answer those right either through sending us an email at abc@highland.com. That stands for Application Builder Community. Really easy to note that one. Or my personal email, james.morrison@highland.com, and I would be happy to answer any of those questions for you. So for that, thanks everyone for attending. And again, good luck on your journey on application building.